Let's get the latest from the spokesman for the Prime Minister of Israel, Mark Regev. What is going on? Here's the bottom line question. Is there a ceasefire or is there not a ceasefire?
A ceasefire, Wolf, means that both sides cease fire. We've been through this before where Israel has held its fire and Hamas continues to fire. We've been through this, unfortunately, repeatedly. Now, we accepted last night the Secretary of State of the United States, John Kerry, and the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon all put on the table a 3-day ceasefire for humanitarian reasons. We accepted it, and we gave orders to our forces from 8 o'clock this morning local time to cease all offensive operations against the terrorist targets in Gaza, and there were clear guidelines, as articulated by Secretary Kerry, what was allowed and what was not allowed. And let's be clear, the statement says Israeli forces on the ground inside Gaza stay there in the framework of the humanitarian ceasefire, and as Secretary Kerry said and you reported, we can continue defensive operations against those terror tunnels during the framework of the ceasefire. Now, this morning, our forces on the ground in Gaza were attacked. Unfortunately, they were attacked brutally with deadly force. At the same time, rockets were fired into southern Israel. Mortar shells were fired on the border areas. We've had a whole series of violations of the ceasefire. And once again, Hamas has broken commitments it made, both to the United Nations and through intermediaries to the United States government.
Did Israeli soldiers die in the course of this supposed ceasefire?
I'm not going to go into details yet. I can tell you there was an incident, a brutal incident, a deadly incident.
Where was that?
It was inside the Gaza Strip in the Rafah area. I can say the following. Our forces returned fire, which is allowed, when attacked because they were in a life-threatening situation. But up until now, the Israeli forces have only used their weapons for self-protection. But it's clear this can't go on. A ceasefire means both sides cease fire. Now, as I said, we've had attacks on our troops inside Gaza, we've had mortars on the border, and we've had rockets into southern Israel. This clearly is Hamas violating this UN-sponsored ceasefire.
Let's get the latest from...
All right, Mark Regev is the spokesman for the Israeli Prime Minister and joins us now live from Jerusalem. Good to have you with us. If I could read a statement to you here from Amnesty International, issued after the attack on the UN school in Gaza, July the 30th. The statement says, if the strike on this school was the result of Israeli artillery fire, it would constitute an indiscriminate attack and a likely war crime. Did you, in fact, use an artillery shell to hit this school?
I'll answer that in a second. I just want to say that I owe you an answer for my previous interview.
No, I don't want an answer in a second.
Mr.
Regev, please, could you focus?
No, but your viewers,
you often raise distraction cards.
I will.
Could you please
just give me 20 seconds. 20 seconds. No. I will, but please, last time there was a question list and open.
Last time, Mr. Regev, you accused me of treating you unfairly. You said I should have interviewed you in the same manner as Hanan Ashrawi, who is not accused, who has not been accused of shelling any school by any international human rights organization. You're a representative of a government which has been accused of shelling a school by several international human rights organizations.
I promise to get back to you, and I have to keep my promises.
The fact that you seem to think, Mr. Regev, that the treatment of Palestinians like Hanan Ashrawi should be determined by their ethnicity rather than by their actions, it says more about your worldview than mine. So coming back to the question, did you use an artillery shell to hit this school?
But I promised you an answer. Sammy, I promised you an answer, and I don't want to break my promises. Please. Sammy, at the Al-Aqsa hospital, there was no Israeli fire on that hospital. What happened was, and your viewers need to know, the fire was on an immediately adjacent building that was a Hamas weapons depot. There was no fire on the hospital, I can say that unequivocally. The question that needs to be asked is, why is Hamas putting its weapons depot next to a hospital? Now, I'm happy to answer any question you have, but I had to keep my promise. I promised to get you an answer, and I did.
Did you use an artillery shell to hit a UN school yesterday in Gaza? Please stop raising distraction cards.
The answer is, unfortunately, at this stage, still unclear. What is clear is that there was a firefight in the immediate vicinity of the school, and Hamas terrorists were shooting at our forces on the ground. Our forces returned fire as is natural if fired upon. What is clear is that Hamas had brutalized a UN institution, turning the vicinity of a UN school into a war zone. And as you know, Sammy, the UN has already reported 3 particular cases where Hamas weapons have been found in UN institutions, and there's a consistent pattern of behavior by Hamas to brutalize, to violate UN neutrality, to violate UN humanitarian actions by turning UN facilities into a war zone. You know, the Secretary General himself has ordered an investigation because he himself is not happy with the way.
For 2 days running, I've had interviews with Ghazi Hamad from Hamas in which I have pressed him on this issue. Let us please not waste time in this interview asking an Israeli spokesperson what Hamas has done. Now, coming back to the question, may I quote to you what Ban Ki-moon has said after this attack? Quote, all available evidence points to Israeli artillery as the cause. Is he wrong?
I think at this stage it's still not clear. We are not aware that it was Israeli artillery that caused that. What we do know is there was a firefight with both sides exchanging hostile fire. There was combat in the vicinity. Now, I don't know if it was Palestinian ordnance or Israeli ordnance. I do know the fact, and this is not disputed, that Hamas deliberately turned that UN facility into a war zone. And according to the Secretary General himself, in an open letter that he put out, he said that if terrorists are turning UN facilities into war zones, they are accountable for the tragic loss of life, because we don't target UN facilities. We don't target UNRWA schools. That unfortunately has been done by Hamas, who's deliberately turned them into combat areas. Why else are they storing missiles in their facilities?
Chris Gunnis has addressed this issue, and he said, quote, we have done an initial site visit, and this is what we can say. There was no evidence of militants firing rockets out of the school whatsoever. Are you calling him a liar? Are you saying you have definitive information that there was rocket fire or military activity going on inside that school?
Unequivocally, yes, there were Hamas terrorists shooting at our forces in the immediate vicinity, and I don't say stronger.
My question is not about the vicinity. I've got the Israeli army statement. I'm asking you, are you saying there was firing going on from inside this school?
Sorry, if you are outside the school, opposite the front gate and shooting, are you still not using the school as a human shield, Sammy? Let's be fair. Now, I respect Chris Guinness. He has many friends in Israel. We totally support.
I'm answering that question.
Please allow me.
And she said...
He has many friends.
It's only a few minutes ago, she has said it is completely unconscionable that the proportionality and precaution that international law requires is being ignored, in answer to a question about whether it would be justified for Israel to shell the school if there is rocket fire or activity in what you call the vicinity. Is she wrong?
Once again, there's no evidence at this stage that Israel did, in fact, target the school. I know for a fact that we did not target. Could there have been a stray shell in the framework of a firefight? If that's the case, once again, you have to put the blame on the people who turned the area into a combat zone. But please allow me to answer a question, because you mentioned my friend Chris Guinness and UNRWA, and we support their humanitarian work, very, very much so. It's important for us. But Chris Guinness has the same problem that your Al Jazeera reporters have. If you walk around, no, please.
Terms, this serious violation of international law by Israeli forces. Now, once again, how do you
you're not allowing me to answer your question. He said there was no evidence. Sorry, you are confusing the issue and not allowing me to answer a specific question. You asked a specific question. Please, Sammy, allow me to answer. You said that Chris Guinness said there was no evidence of Israeli fire, correct? Of Hamas fire in the area. And I'd like to say and make a point that UNRWA does not have guns. They're a humanitarian. They're a humanitarian organization.
I did not say that. I'll read you again so it's clear what
you said. There was no evidence.
Said to Al Jazeera yesterday on the 10 a.m. GMT show. He said, we've done an initial site visit, and this is what we can say so far, there was no evidence of militants firing rockets out of the school whatsoever. Those are his words. Do you have evidence that there was fire from inside the school?
I'd like to answer that. I'd like to answer that. Sammy, I'll answer the question specifically. One of the problems in covering this in Gaza, it doesn't matter if you're a reporter or if you're a humanitarian organization like Mr. Gunnis represents, that if you go out there and you say, did you see Hamas fire? When you live in a Gaza Strip where there is authoritarian rule, where Hamas rules with an iron fist, anyone who speaks out against Hamas can face immediate violent retribution. There have been countless documented cases of Hamas.
Are you telling me that Chris Gunnis doesn't know how to conduct his own research? And he's being misled. He's not a child, is he? He says we have done a preliminary investigation, he says. We have taken analysis, we've analysed fragments, these are his words, we've examined craters and other damage. Are you saying he does not know how to conduct an investigation?
But Chris Guinness, to be fair, Chris Guinness did not know that Hamas was storing rockets in 3 UN facilities until it was too late. There is obviously a problem. The UN Secretary General has admitted there's a problem because he's ordered an investigation of the abuse of UNRWA facilities. So I think it's very important, once again, how do you get people to stand up and say that Hamas was using this spot to shoot at when those people afterwards have to live with Hamas? It's an authoritarian regime. You know that, Sammy. You know it's an authoritarian. Do you deny that Gaza is an authoritarian regime?
This is not about you interviewing me.
Is Gaza an authoritarian regime? Can people say
the Israeli government?
No, but can people say what they think in Gaza?
Have you used artillery shells in Gaza? Have you used artillery shells in densely populated parts of Gaza?
Of course we have.
Okay. Amnesty International quote says, artillery should never be used against targets in crowded civilian areas, and its use in such a manner would never be considered a surgical strike. They go on to talk about the possibility of a likely war crime. Are they wrong? Is Amnesty wrong as well as the fact that you, or what you contend, that Chris Gunnis doesn't know how to conduct an investigation? Is this statement by Amnesty wrong as well?
Please, I'm sorry. Chris is a friend. Chris is a friend, and I won't allow you to put words in my mouth that I did not say about him. And I don't think you should try to break up our very good relationship and our relationship with UNRWA that we respect. So please don't put my words in my mouth. I never used those words about Chris Gunnis, and I ask you to take that back.
You insinuated that. Answer the question, please, about Amnesty. Are they wrong? Are they wrong if they say
No, I did not make any personal insinuation.
Artillery shells are not to be used in civilian areas.
Yes,
are they wrong
happy to answer
as
the question.
A war crime?
You see, the war crime is committed when a terrorist group like Hamas uses civilian facilities for its war machine. And as the UN Secretary General himself
I'm asking you, do you believe Amnesty is wrong in saying you shouldn't use artillery in
No, but I'm answering your question.
Please answer. It's very simple.
No, I'm answering your question by quoting the UN Secretary General, who said, Ban Ki-moon said last week, that when terrorists turn UN facilities into a war zone, when they put their missiles and their war machine inside UN facilities, they are responsible, because that is the war crime. The essence of international humanitarian law is a separation between combatants and non-combatants. You know that, Sammy, I know that, and so does Amnesty International. When Hamas violates that principle, when Hamas puts its war machine inside UN schools, in mosques, in urban neighborhoods, it is responsible for the most primary and severe violation of international humanitarian law. Amnesty International knows that, I know that. The point is, if in ensuing combat, innocent people are caught inadvertently in the combat, and unfortunately there are casualties, the question has to be asked, who turned the civilian neighborhood into a war zone?
Mr. Regev, they're not talking about people being caught inadvertently caught in any crossfire. Navi Pillay only this morning says there appears to be a deliberate defiance of obligations that international law imposes on Israel. Deliberate, not people being caught in crossfire.
No.
Is she wrong?
I don't think she said what you're insinuating.
I'm not insinuating. This is a direct quote. I'll read it to you again. There appears to be deliberate defiance of obligations that international law imposes on Israel. Is she wrong? Or are you deliberately defying international law? Those are her words, not my insinuation.